Okay. Hey, everyone, and welcome to another episode of It Might Be You. Today, I am interviewing Emily Adams, and she's the host of The Emily Adams Show and also a coach. It's going to be a good one. We're going to be talking about, how to overcome fear. Emily, do you want to kind of give a brief overview of your background and
Yes, thank you so much for having me here. And a brief overview. So, I was born and raised in the Amish culture and left at the age of 17. And I always share this because this was the first time that I really just kind of jumped into the fear of unknown. And as I continue to share my story, you'll see there was multiple times in my life that I've really just jumped into the fear of unknown. And when people ask me, how do you build the resilience or how did you have the courage? I've had to reflect that myself of like, how did I talk myself through that? And that's kind of why I am very passionate about teaching people that you don't have to be fearless. You just need to know how to face fear in order for you to work through it. Because we often think that we need to be fearless. So born and raised in the Amish culture, I came from like Indiana, left at 17 in the middle of the night with a lot of high hopes and big dreams to become a career woman. And at 18, I got pregnant. Not expected. I never thought I would be a mom, to be honest. And got married. And a year and a half into the marriage, I was like, man, I need to get out. Like, I need to file for a divorce. But I was still very much going through a culture shock, and I stayed because I found out I was pregnant with my second son. And about 2 years later, and there was a lot of alcohol and verbal abuse and a very toxic environment. I knew I had to leave, not just for myself, but for my boys. And this was very scary for me because one, I wasn't raised that there are single moms. I was raised divorce is wrong. You don't ever become a single mom. And I was like, how am I going to do this? Because I don't even know how. So I became a single mom, and through the nasty custody battle, instead of getting therapy, I actually joined a gym. And that's where I lost 65 pounds and found powerlifting, and also made the decision to go to Purdue University as a mom. And that was another step. I was very scared to go to Purdue because in the Amish culture, you only go to eighth grade, which is equivalent to a sixth grade education. So I had no idea how to write papers. I had my GED, like I had gotten my GED, but I had no idea like how am I going to go to college? And I was determined to graduate in 4 years. And 4 years later, I walked away with my bachelor's degree from Purdue University. And meanwhile, had gotten into another relationship, and we ended up getting married, landed my corporate job, looked like I had it all together on the outside. And he came home 2 years after we married and wanted a divorce. And I was devastated because this was round two now. And I really felt like I was in this deep, dark place. Like there was no way of me getting out. I had landed my corporate life, but everything else was falling apart. So round two, I it was a good 3 or 4 months. I didn't know if I was going to go down drinking the path or if I was going to go mentally insane or what it was. And even um, as a mom, and I share this with all the parents out there, I had gotten so burned out by pouring so much into my kids that I didn't even know how to take care of myself. And I got to the point where I didn't want to be a mom because I was just over it. I was tired. And I had a friend tell me, you have a choice to make. You either get help, you go check in yourself, or you take a momcation. And I'm like, that's the stupidest thing. And I didn't like either idea. So I took a momcation, and that's really where a lot of things shifted for me. And I realized when I took a vacation, one, I went skydiving, which was on my bucket list. And two, I realized I'm not happy with my life and I've got to figure this out. Here I am 30 and I have no idea what I'm doing with life. I've had my corporate career, I landed my position that I wanted in the corporate world. And on the vacation, a lot of things opened up because I was silent enough for myself to start listening to myself. And I started doing a lot of self-development, personal development really changed my life. Every day I would get up and like listen to a video and try to like invest in myself. And I made the decision to sell my place, we moved an hour away and moved to a completely different area, and ended up quitting my corporate job. And then COVID hit. And COVID was the biggest blessing for me and my boys because it gave us time. One, it gave me time to slow down because I was the busy person. I'm always busy. So if I stay busy, I don't have to deal with the stuff that's going internally. And so it gave me the, are you
I'm
good?
sorry. I was just having some like audio issues, like
Okay.
going in and out. And I was like,
Um,
what in the world?
but it gave me the time to actually slow down enough to start really pouring into myself. And I found meditation during that time, and I started meditating. And I remember the day that it hit me, it was like a curtain had just been lifted from me. And I was like aware for the very first time of, oh my goodness, like the trees are beautiful, the flowers, the birds. I came back inside and I saw my boys play and I could be present with them. And that really led me to dig more deeper on the other side of like reprogramming my brain to be what it wants to be. So I had all of COVID to try to kind of work through this. And through it, I found the most incredible thing when I started investing in myself and unpacking years of stuff I held on to. And for the first time in my life, I found out, one, who I was, and two, what it really was to fully love every aspect of myself. And it was a year of massive growth. And then I made the decision and the end of the year to actually relocate from Indiana to Florida. So that's been the newest thing. We just up and moved to Florida. So that's the short version of it. But through every phase of life, there has always been the fear of unknown. And I could either allow myself to stay stuck in the fear of unknown or to work through it so I can get where I want to go.
Well, and I kind of want to backtrack because the Amish, growing up Amish, that's a big thing. Like that's an unusual situation, to say the least. So I guess what was it that made you decide to leave at that young age?
Yeah, so I think like looking back, there was a multitude of things. So in the Amish culture, there's zero female empowerment. So the females don't have any empowerment. It's very male dominant, and I always thought I was made for more constantly. Like I know there's more to life than what I'm doing right now. And so when I got out of school at the age of 13, I was with my dad a lot, helped my dad, and I loved like running the business side of things. And it didn't really come full circle until I realized just how much the culture was so religion based. It was just always in your face about all these rules, down to the point of what color socks you could wear. Like it was insane. And I was tired of the rules and restrictions. And then at 16, I lost one of my friends, and she died in a buggy accident. And at her funeral, I had heard someone say, we can't be sure that she went to heaven. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, whoa, like I
Yeah,
was
that
taken
is.
back, right? And I was like, what just happened? Like, I can't believe that. And a lot of me struggled with, it was such practice, God is a God of love, but there are sins that can't be forgiven. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of what they believed. And I struggled with believing that. And so it kind of just spiraled from there of knowing this is not where I belong.
Well, and I guess with that, because I grew up um, in a very, I'm gonna say, well, yeah, it was religious home. We were homeschooled. Everything was about all the rules. Don't have sex out of marriage. If you do,
Right.
it was a lot. And so, um, with that, because that was one thing we learned too. God, if God is a God of love, what do you mean? Why wouldn't a 16-year-old girl go to heaven? That would be something that would be hard for me to kind of overcome too. Or that thought. So I get why you was like, no, let me get out of here. Um, what was some of the biggest hurdles that you had to like overcome once you decided to leave, and only being 17, not like being out in the real world? Were you familiar with, I know that you've seen cars and stuff like that, but when I think about Amish, I'm thinking about the Amish communities that I've seen on TV, and some of them are just so,
Yeah. I get
it's
that. I
like,
get that a lot. So yeah, I would say some of my biggest hurdles. One was it was very different culturally. Like I was used to always having family, right? So the family leaving that family dynamic was hard. It was a very of it took me years to figure out where do I fit in, and that was really hard for me. And one of the things that I always felt like anytime anyone had a conversation with me, that I literally like had Amish tattooed across my forehead and people could see that because I still hung on to that identity and not sure how do I get rid of that identity.
mm-hmm.
And so when I did share sometimes that I used to be Amish, I used to always get the nickname of, oh, she's just the Amish chick. Because I wasn't strong enough to stand up and be like, no, you can't call me that because I'm no longer Amish, then I just completely stopped sharing that I used to be Amish. So that was one of the biggest things. And the other thing was really adjusting to the different, not everyone has your best interest in mind. And even in the Amish culture, because the communities were small enough, you kind of knew, right? But here there was a whole world. So you didn't really know. You didn't know, could you trust them or not? And I was very trusting in many, many situations and got, learned some lessons that way. But that and then getting my GED was challenging. Understanding, like, in school we didn't have algebra, we didn't have geometry, we didn't have language, we never wrote papers. And so having to actually do that was a challenge in itself. It took me almost like 6 months to get my GED.
Yeah, that, and see, I can kind of relate to that, being that I was homeschooled. We didn't have to do that. Our schedule was, I wouldn't say it was completely strict. I was done with school by the time I was 16. And I was like, let me get my GED or something. I'm ready. I'm ready to be done with this. I don't want to do this anymore. Um, so yeah, I can definitely see going out into the real world. And I hate to say the real world because, the Amish, that's still a culture within itself. So
Right,
yeah.
right.
Um, how big, I guess, was the adjustment for you? Because I get, when I'm thinking of a 17-year-old girl out there by herself, like no family, nobody to depend on. Like, how did you make a way out of no way, basically?
Mm. Yeah. So when I left, I actually left, and I had a friend that helped me at the time. And when I left, I was so determined to make it. And that was how I compartmentalized, not having my family anymore, because I was so driven to actually make it, that I knew I had to figure it out. And one of the things was getting my hair cut for the first time and not realizing what kind of cut I wanted. I was like, I don't know, just cut it. And she cut it all right, like to the
Oh,
point where I hated it. But that was one of the things that I learned very quickly, that just ask, you have to ask, or you have to figure it out on your own to be able to actually make it. And then the other thing was I had gotten a job right away, so I could start like having income to support myself. But the challenging thing was you couldn't really get a good job until you actually got your GED.
hmm, yeah. And I mean, yeah, that would be, I don't know. I'm thinking about myself at 17. And I'm like, could I have done that? I
Of
was,
course you could have. Of
I
course
mean,
you
I
could
could
have.
have, if I really wanted to. Like, I knew that I didn't want to be, well, I'm from Kansas. So there's my disclaimer right there. I'm from the capital city of Kansas. And, I had parents who had a different viewpoint on how they wanted to raise their kids. And there's five of us. I'm the oldest of five. And I always tell people that I was the guinea pig, because I was the one that was homeschooled from kindergarten until I subsequently graduated. And at 17, I went into college, but it was with a disclaimer because I was still trying to, I hate to use the word people please because it wasn't people pleasing. It was being that how we were raised, you honor your father and your mother.
Right,
So
right.
my father's wish was that we didn't go to a major college, because it was a cesspool of Sodom and Gomorrah. That's his quote. So he didn't want me at the schools I wanted to go to. So I ended up going to a little junior college, and it set me back. I had a fear. I had that fear of, if I go against the grain and, stand up and say, I don't want to do this your way, I want to do it my way, what's that going to look like? Is he going to kick me out? Is he going to, is he not going to love me anymore? Like what's going to happen? And so instead of standing up and saying, no, I don't want to do this, I just kept putting that I'm honoring my father and my mother by, staying close to home. And so what ended up happening for me was I stayed at home until I was 25 years old. And then I just couldn't take it anymore. And so I kind of, I laugh about it now, but I kind of snuck off like a thief in the night. I started slowly mailing boxes of clothes to Richmond, Virginia, which is where I live now. And 2 weeks after I turned 25, I hopped on a plane and I left, and I haven't been back. And so it's like, yeah, I definitely overcame that fear because I didn't know, I didn't have a job.
Mhm.
I had family here, and I had my now husband, who was at that point just my really good friend here. And so I was like, okay, I feel comfortable because I still feel like I have somebody.
Someone. Yeah.
But I tell you what, after 3 months of not having a job, the real stuff started to kick in because I'm like, oh, okay, I don't have no money, I don't have a car, I don't have anything. So I finally called my dad because I wanted to see what is he gonna say, and he just said, well, if we have to, it wasn't the conversation I was expecting. I was expecting for him to say, well, I told you so, and told you you
Yeah.
couldn't. But it wasn't that. It was, all right, well, if we have to, we'll just send you money for a plane ticket and come on back. Just come on home and just find a job here or whatever. You can get us, like, okay. But that was not what was in the cards for me because I was determined. I don't want to come back. I don't want to be, in Kansas anymore. So I took the first job that I could get. And I think it was at Target or something like that. But a lot of people, and I guess this is the whole reasoning for why I wanted to do this podcast, they don't know how to jump and then grow their wings,
Mm.
as you're flying, um, because they allow the fear to keep them immobile, or not willing to take the action. That,
Right.
like, it could be in anything, personal life, career. I think I made a post about that today on Instagram. That's the only thing you really have to fear is not doing what it is that you want to do. You already mentioned kind of within the last year, taking your momcation, that you could kind of pinpoint that moment when you had, hey, this might be me. I don't want this life anymore. I have to make these changes.
Yes.
Um, so what exactly did did that journey look like for you?
Hmm. So I'll be honest, it's a hard reality to face. It's really hard for it was really hard for me to be honest with myself, because I felt, one, I always followed everything by the book. Like I was the parent, I had it all together, and I had everything. And I didn't really take full responsibility and full ownership until I really went through the transformation in COVID of, oh my goodness, like I'm finding out who I am and I'm having self-love for myself for the first time in ever. But I look back now and see that in every relationship that I was in, or even friendship for that matter, I was always looking for that person or that thing, even in my college degree and everything, to fulfill me. I was looking in things and people to fulfill me. And I think on my momcation, I realized things are not going to fulfill me. I've got the corporate job, I've got all these things, but I've just went through a second divorce. This is my problem. And it was a hard reality to face. And I wanted to blame it on something to
Mhm.
make myself feel better, because I was like, this is not my problem. Like, I was raised this way. Like, I would use that story all the time. I was raised in the Amish culture. This is bullshit. Like, this isn't fair. And I would like go down this path instead of fully taking ownership of it and saying, okay, you choose this. This is yours. This is you. Now you get to do the work. And doing the work is not easy or comfortable. It is
No.
never easy or comfortable. And
No.
we want to resist it because we are conditioned not to do the work. We resist it for multiple reasons. One is the discomfort. It is very uncomfortable to realize, okay, I've got a problem. And now how do I solve that for myself? And that's when I had to realize it's going to be a journey to solve this and figure out who I am. And I knew for years, one, I knew that I was made for more, and I was just playing small. Like the corporate job was playing small. And the other thing is knowing that I kept wondering, is this really all that my life is? Is this really all that is? And I always would search for hours. I Googled and YouTubed, how do you find happiness? How do you find inner peace? What does it mean to be in alignment? Like I was searching, and I found the answer during COVID. And the incredible thing is every single one of us, we already have it within us. We just need to know how to tap into it.
Right. And for me, doing that, my it might be me moment came in 2016. Um, and I wasn't even conscious of the fact that I needed a change. I knew at an early age, kind of like you, that there has to be more than this. I was 21 when I first had that thought, and I was working in pediatrics um, as a nurse. And I was thinking and looking at all these nurses that had been nurses for 20 and 30 years, how miserable they were.
Mm.
I was like, this is not what I want my life to look like. Like I don't know what I want it to look like, but it's not like this. Um, and I noticed like every decision that I had made up to that point in my life was solely based on trying to please my parents and live up to an identity that they put on me when I was a baby. That, oh, they would call me Nurse Leah. But that's
Mm.
ultimately not what my heart desired. That's not what I truly wanted. Um, and so it took someone, it was really a rejection, but a blessing in itself, too, telling me that you're not serious, so I don't want to work with you. And you need to work on your personal development and go read these books. And one of those books was Ask and It Is Given. I don't know
I
if you've
love
ever
that
read that.
book.
Oh my
I
goodness.
love
When I
it.
tell you, I ugly cried because I had never ever read a book like that. You know,
Yeah.
in the Black community, we're not really open or taught about personal development. It's go to church, go pray, go do this, go do that. It's not look within yourself. Or my big thing is self forgiveness. That's what it took for
Yes.
me.
Yes.
And that alone, I say in 2019, I had my um, moment of freedom, is what I call it, because that was when I was able to finally release. I say it felt like this heaviness in the middle of my chest, and I was like, it was released after years. I would wake up with this heaviness just hold me down, and I could never let it go. It didn't matter what I tried to do. I did, um, girl, I did all kind of stuff. I
I love
did
it.
I did this one, like I still to this day, I'm like, what in the world was that? It was this guy who he told me I had a heart wall block. And
Mm,
so he was doing this energy work, but we were doing it over a Zoom, and he had his girlfriend sitting in like she was me, and it was weird, and I was like, I don't think that worked because I still feel this block, but okay, go off. Maybe it'll work after I wake up. Um, and then I worked with this other lady here in town, and that did work. Whatever it was, I did feel lighter.
mm,
But what I have found is you can go to therapy. You can go and you can heal from the traumas. But the one step that I notice that people fail to do, they'll forgive everybody else around them, but they won't forgive themselves.
amen. Amen.
And it is hard to do. And there's going to be a lot of ugly crying and, and pain,
Yes.
but you have to purge that. If you don't
Yes.
purge it and you don't move and navigate through that stuff, you're just going to stay stuck adrift. And you're not going to be able to face the fears and all those things because you're just going to be stuck. I stayed stuck for decades and didn't even realize it.
Yep.
I think a lot of people do, and they don't know how
Yes.
to navigate. So, what was, I guess you said you found that thing that helped you. What was that thing that helped you to start navigating through?
Yeah, so I think there was a multiple things that kind of helped me. So after I had started meditation and really made myself be still and
Hmm.
sit and be still, I found one, I wasn't allowing myself the grace. And
Mm.
I did not forgive myself. I could forgive everyone else around me because I could justify what they did and how they were hurting, so they lashed out toward me, right? But I couldn't justify why I did the things I did. And I had a mentor tell me, he asked me when I told him, I was like, I'm struggling with, really forgiving myself for these things. And he said, if you go back in that time on the date that it happened, that you made the decision you made, whether it was to get married or to get divorced or whatever it was, with the information you had at that time, did you make the right decision? And when I looked back in my life, every single thing, in that moment, I made the right decision for me because that was my path. And I realized that and I was like, oh my goodness, like it's so right and it's so true. And then I started realizing, okay, we've got to forgive ourselves. So I started working on it. And you want to talk about an ugly cry for days. I even wrote myself a forgiveness letter, and it was so hard to do, to sit and say, I forgive myself for not fully loving myself, for waiting to love myself until I reach XYZ. Because it was always, I'll love myself when I drop 20 pounds because I needed to lose weight. I'll love myself when I can hit that career point. I'll love myself when I get my degree. I'll love myself when. And I realized I had to stop. I had
Yeah,
to
you
love
was
myself
putting
where I was at.
conditions, right? And you was
Yes.
putting conditions on loving yourself when it should just be unconditional all the time.
Yes. But and I think part of it too was being raised in the Amish culture. They never said I love you ever in the Amish culture.
Really?
Yeah. So I didn't know. So I had a hard time even understanding what is love. And for the longest time, I struggled. And even during COVID, it seemed like it got so clear to me what love is, the unconditional love. And that's what I needed my entire life. And I needed to give that to myself, to unconditionally love myself. Because when people used to say self-love or self-care, I'd be like, yeah, that's all nice and cool, but I'm not about to go shopping for myself for self-love. But that's really not what it was about. And so I understood self-love is showing up for yourself.
For yourself,
Self-love is
yeah.
calling yourself out when you know you need to check yourself. And so understanding that really was a moment of truth for me, of like, wow.
Yeah, that would be um it's powerful once you get that knowledge, and it's freeing. I always say that was I found the freedom in my self-forgiveness. Because what the problem was with me is that I had adopted this identity of I'm a victim of, instead of
Mm,
saying that I'm a survivor. And when I was able to reframe that and change the way that I viewed myself, I was like, okay, I don't feel so, I didn't, like I said, that heaviness lifted off of me. I was able
mm,
to truly not only forgive myself, but the people that wronged me. Because I was
mm-hmm.
saying for years, oh, I forgave him, I forgive him. But I didn't really forgive them because I couldn't forgive myself. Um,
Exactly.
and, being that I was really young when some of the stuff that came up for me during my journey happened, I had to take a step back because, sometimes it's hard for people to um, do the journey or have an understanding of why do I need to forgive somebody for, causing trauma when I was a child. Well, because a lot of the times those old emotions get stuck. And if
Yes.
you don't know how to purge them, and a lot of the times when we're young, we don't know how to purge that. So, people doing the work as adults, just think about if you're able to heal yourself as an adult and then you have children, that's breaking generational pain and suffering.
Yes. Yes, most
Like,
definitely.
so don't just think of it as I don't know how to do. You better do the work because you don't want your kids and their kids having to carry some of the burdens. Because I look back at some of the stuff that came up for me, and I'm like, well, some of this stuff isn't even my stuff. Why am I holding on to this?
Exactly.
Money's problems, money blocks. I don't believe that, but that's stuff um, that I adopted
Yeah.
because of my environment at the time.
100%.
So yeah, I don't trying to think of I don't want to keep making you go back, but where did you well no, I do. I have a question. Where did you go on this
You're fine.
momcation?
Do what?
Where was your momcation?
So
What stuff?
interesting enough, so when she had told me that, I actually went home and opened my laptop and I was like, okay, where have I never been in my life? And I started Googling places. Google was my best friend back then. I would Google everything. My life problems, I'd Google, see if I could fix it. And I Googled California and I'm like, man, California is really nice. It's really cool. Like, and I looked at different locations and I picked San Diego. And that's where I ended up going. I went to San Diego and then didn't plan anything the whole entire time I was there except for going to skydive because I wanted to go skydiving.
And how long was your trip?
Oh, it was only Friday through a Sunday. So it was literally just,
Okay, it was just quick, but that
it
was
was just
enough.
quick.
And that's the thing too. Let's talk about that because a lot of people think when um, you decide that you want better for yourself, that it has to be this long, drawn out journey. And it does not. It can literally happen. Like for me, it was one weekend. Oh my God, it was Friday through Sunday
Yep.
that I decided that, hey, I'm going to go on um, a trip. I went on a trip to North Carolina, and I think it was Saturday. Saturday evening was like that. Just decades of pain gone.
Yep.
So no, it does not have to take years and years. If it takes years and years, that means you got a lot of stuff that you're shifting through. Um,
Or sometimes, like, and I'll be honest, like there's times we're going to resist it because it's uncomfortable. And if you can't
mhm.
deal with the discomfort and sit in that, then it's going to take a little bit longer.
Yeah, and that's the truth of it because there's still, everybody's a work in progress.
Yes.
There's always going to be something, always. But if you have tools and you know that you made a commitment to yourself to be the best and highest version of you, then you're going to sit there and you're going to deal with the pain and the awkwardness and the ugly cries and whatever else that
Yes.
may come up. And when you are free, it's it's just kind of an undescribable feeling, and you want everybody around you to kind of feel that same freedom.
Yeah.
Um, but not everybody's ready for that. Have you had any like people that are in your inner circle resist the new and improved you?
I did. And that is was one of the things I learned. And because when I started changing, I got questions like, why are you changing? What's going on? And I even got questions to the point of, I'm really concerned about you because you're not the same person anymore. And I had to learn as people walked out of my life, one, let them go, don't hang on. And two, if I'm always in an abundance mindset and somebody goes out of my life, it's for my highest good. Because anytime something old leaves you, it's making room for something new and better. And I have found that to be very true. So when people, choose to leave my life, and I went from a completely different friend circle to barely having any friends. And yes, it was hard because that scarcity mindset would come and be like, oh my goodness, what did you do with your life? You have zero friends now. And so I went down this path of like not having friends, just having a few, right, that stayed with me. But what I realized is I had to shift my mindset around it of, I can still find friends that are on the same path I am. And anytime someone leaves, like I would try to cling to the friends of like, oh my goodness, why are you leaving? And, try to make it work. But I was like, I got to the point where I'm like, that's coming from a scarcity mindset. And so when I release them, I know something better is coming into my life.
Right. And another thing too is um, some people, you know, kind of circling back around to the fear. That's one of the fears that creep in. Like if I change, nobody's gonna love me or want to be around me or
Yes.
whatever. But one thing that I have to like remind people of is that not everyone is meant to be with you through a lifetime. Some people are there for a season, and you have to be okay with that.
Yes.
Um, I have friends that I've been friends with for over 30 years. And then I have friends that I've only known for a couple weeks. And what I've noticed too going down my journey is that I can't relate as much to my friends that I've known for 30 something years, even though they've known me since I was 6 years old. We're not on the same wavelength and path.
Right.
And so, it's easier to talk to and be with like minded people that are on the same journey, same path as you. Um, and so that scarcity mindset, that keeps people so immobilized. Um,
Absolutely.
and it doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve anything really other than to keep you fearful and not being the best version of you, really.
Right.
So I'm going to ask one last question here. Um, for our listeners, what piece of advice would you give someone that may be just starting their journey and kind of how to overcome the fear that might be keeping them stuck?
Yeah, the piece of advice I would give is realize that one, you're never going to have all the answers, and that's okay. And when the fear creeps in, fear is an emotion, just like being happy. The fear is there. And if you can figure out a way to actually work through the fear instead of allowing it to keep you stuck, you will go in so many different directions. Like you're just going to go like head first if you realize that fear is just an emotion and you don't allow it to keep you stuck. And one of the ways I would say, if you're wondering like how do I get there, is when you realize that fear is kicking in, you're like, oh my goodness, fear is here, and like you're starting to panic. A quick and easy way is acknowledge the fear. And you'll be like, okay, the fear is there. Thank you for trying to keep me safe, because fear is just there to keep us safe. Once you acknowledge it, you can tell yourself like it's there, but I can still take action even though it's there, because it's there to keep me safe. There's nothing like coming to scare me out of the woods or anything like this. I don't need to run, but it's just there to keep me safe. And if you can realize that when you start your personal development journey, you'll realize just how powerful that is to keep going.
That's a very useful tip. And it will definitely help a lot of people because I didn't know that. I didn't know. Sit with it, welcome it,
Yeah.
and before you know it, you're on the other side of it, and your life has changed. Because I definitely, for me, um, just on the 5 years that I've been on this journey, I'm not the same person at all. Um, and and you won't be either if you take that one step. That's all it is. It's just a decision. Make the decision that even though I'm scared, I still love and accept myself, and I'm gonna do this for me because I want to be the best version of me that I can be. So
Yes.
I want to thank you for coming on to It Might Be You and sharing your story. It was amazing, and you're amazing. Your story is just amazing, and I know that somebody's going to get a lot of joy from hearing it, and they'll be able to move forward in their lives.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. All right. Well, thank you all for listening to another episode of It Might Be You.